Oh, hello, Emma. Tonight we're going to read a book with Jack the Bat. This book is called Pull, Pull, Santa's Sleigh. Tonight. Let's see. This one is by Laura Rader. And it goes like this. Christmas was just around the corner. The toys were wrapped, the lists were checked, and Santa's sleigh was polished and ready to go. "Let's visit the reindeer," said Santa to Mrs. Claus. As they approached the stable, Santa called out, "Hello, Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, and Vixen! Hello, Comet, Cupid, Donder, and Blitzen! Are you ready to fly?" And the answer was a loud, "Ah-choo!" "Goodness gracious!" exclaimed Mrs. Claus. "The reindeer look miserable." "Oh, we all have colds," said Dancer. "Poor dear," Mrs. Claus said. Santa rushed off to tell the elves. "The reindeer are sick! Who'll pull the sleigh?" he asked. "We need a backup plan." Santa paced up and down. He scratched his head. He looked very serious. Then he had an idea. "We'll find replacements," he said. The auditions were announced. A large crowd lined up to try out. There were penguins and chickens and crocodiles with antlers. There were kangaroos with earmuffs and ostriches and piggies and monkeys and bears and hippos and elephants and platypuses with sunglasses and hats and ducks. The performers were very unusual. The ducks did ballet and flew around. The bunnies did this thing and they swung through the room. And the bulls did a dance in fancy dresses and stuff. And the monkeys wore silly hats and flew around. And then there was a cat and dog acting like a cat and a dog. Now, none were right for the job. Not even the big fat elephant floating with some balloons. Poor Santa! Who'll pull the sleigh? Santa went to his workshop. He thought, he sketched. He thought some more, then he had an idea. "I've got it," he said. "Here's my new plan," said Santa. There were a few grumbles and groans, but Santa and the elves went to work. They worked hard and fast. At last they finished. "We did it!" shouted Santa. "Let's show Mrs. Claus." It was the biggest thing Santa ever made. It was a big balloon shaped like a reindeer, and the elves held it with some strings. Santa prepared for a test flight. The balloon went up, 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 and they said, "Hooray!" And then it popped. And then the balloon came down, 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 and they said, "Ah, crap!" The balloon was deflated, and so was Santa. "I'm all out of ideas," he sighed. "I'll bring you a cup of hot cocoa," said Mrs. Claus. Santa sipped the cocoa. "Ah," he said, "this always makes me feel good as new." Santa and Mrs. Claus looked at each other. They knew what they were both thinking. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" said Santa. "Yeah, I sure do," said Mrs. Claus. Santa and Mrs. Claus took a big pot of cocoa to the reindeer. "Oh, I sure hope this works," said Santa. The reindeer stopped sniffling, they stopped sneezing, and they looked much better. They were ready to fly. "Hot cocoa, save the day," Mrs. Claus said. Everyone cheered as they flew out of sight. "Hot cocoa for all, and for all a good night." The end.